910, Big 550, KTRS. No Bob Heil. He small-timed us. Mike Breitenstein, either that or Mike Breitenstein gave me faulty information. He's been giving me faulty technology all these years. Might as well give me a little faulty information. So we're going to reschedule the Hall of Famer Bob Heil. So I apologize, Scott Sherman.
How are you, sir?
We're fine. You want to turn your mic on there?
I do.
There we go.
They do that?
We gotta solve that problem. Anyway, welcome. It is the Friday before a 3-day Labor Day weekend. We're off on Monday. We're back on Tuesday, taking a couple of days off. And at some point over the weekend, I'll be headed over to Ted Drew's.
Oh, I thought you were going to the Police Officers Association barbecue.
Is that this weekend?
No, I don't know. You'll be invited because
of
last week's.
You're insinuating that I'm
filibuster.
That I'm in the pocket of the local police force?
No,
because I am. I have no problem. I have no problem being associated with being favorable towards the police department.
Neither do I. In the context of the profession being as noble a profession as there is. But I'm in the pocket of the Constitution of the United States.
Yeah.
And they can't just do whatever they want, McGraw.
I'm not saying
just because they wear uniforms.
I can't say they do it. Did you see what's going
say
on?
how great a job they do.
Did you see what's going on up in Omaha? Did you see that story?
Mm-mm.
So up in Omaha, the TV show Cops was following around the Omaha Police Department. Mm-hmm. The Omaha police chief either invited or agreed to have cops come and visit them for the summer because they wanted to show everybody how great the Omaha police force really was, and he wasn't embarrassed or shy about having cameras on his people. And last week, I want to say it was a Wendy's right there on Dodge. The police walk in. There was a robbery in progress. Police walks in with the camera crew from Cops. The suspect has a toy gun. They think it's a real gun, and the police shoot him dead.
Yes. And so in some ways, that's legitimate deadly force. How about he had a gun? That would be the thing that would be the start.
No. I'm not questioning whether or not, but there's a controversy up in Omaha now that the police officers acted differently because the cameras were on. So they might have had more bravado because Hollywood was watching and they wanted to, right? So here you have in St. Louis people complaining there aren't cameras, and up in Omaha they are complaining that there are too many cameras.
I don't complain about much other than...
Really?
Yeah.
Hold on a second. Studio just broke. My headphones aren't working. I thought I just heard you say you don't complain about much.
What I'd like to do and what I like to do on this show is at least give people information and let them make their own decisions. What I feel is what's happened in the last 2 or 3 weeks is it's become a political campaign. Who's on this team and who's on that team? I want to be as clear as I can be. I'm on the side of the Constitution of the United States.
I think,
and as long as everybody does what they're supposed to within that context, I'm cool with that.
Look, I actually think you and I are a lot closer than is being portrayed. I agree with that as well. And I think most people, police officers, as well as many people who support quote-unquote, support Michael Brown, are waiting for the facts.
That's exactly the right thing.
It's the fringe element that has created this sort of alternate universe.
Yes, and what we like to do, you and I, and we've done this for many years, so I agree with you that we agree more than we don't, is the speech-making and the sort of pontificating, it's enough of that already, and what we need to do is give people facts.
Right.
Let's give people facts about the First Amendment, because I'll talk a little bit about deadly force, because I haven't heard much about that, but I want to talk a little bit about the First Amendment. There have been two very important U.S. Supreme Court cases in the last 3 years. One just came down in June called McCullen versus Coakley. That's the abortion clinic case, 9-zip, where they had a zone of secrecy, zone of safety, 35 feet away from an abortion clinic. If you got any closer, you could be under arrest. It was in Massachusetts, Massachusetts law. 9-zip, that's unconstitutional. Why? Because you're supposed to be uncomfortable in a traditional public forum like a sidewalk. I'm going to read you a little...
Wait a minute.
Yes.
It's unconstitutional because you can't infringe on that person's right to walk on a sidewalk, even if it happens to be inside 35 feet of an abortion clinic.
Right, because as the the good people of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts thought, well, if we get them closer, bad things can happen. And the same I saw a parallel with the good folks in Ferguson being told to keep moving, stay on the sidewalk. If you're in the street, we're going to arrest you. Because if you don't keep moving, for some reason, if you stand still or if you gather in a large group, something bad might happen.
All right, hold on a second. Haven't they put restrictions on the Westboro Baptist Church protesting funerals?
That was also struck down 9-0 by the United States Constitution.
In a different case or the same case?
In a different case. The Westboro Baptist Church case, everyone agreed. They are as despicable human beings as possible,
right.
And we don't want them close enough to these funerals because it's insulting and horrible to family. Those restrictions, even though we all think it's a good idea, also struck down unanimously by the United States Constitution.
Okay. Now let's get to the streets of Ferguson.
I got a great quote, and I want to see if you know who wrote this.
All right.
Don't cheat. It's no accident that public streets and sidewalks have developed as a venue for the exchange of ideas. Even today, they remain one of the few places where a speaker can be confident that it is not simply preaching to the choir. On public streets and sidewalks, a listener often encounters speech he might otherwise turn out not to like. In light of the First Amendment purpose to preserve an uninhibited marketplace of ideas, a traditional public fora is a virtue, not a vice. A virtue, not a vice. Who wrote that? What liberal wrote that?
I'm going to say Oliver Wendell Holmes.
That's brilliant because you would think that one of the smartest jurists of all time, we could look back in history and say, we can learn from our past. That would be a great guess. That is wrong. The answer is John Roberts, the Chief Justice of the United States, who wrote that in June of 2014 in the unanimous decision of McCullen versus Coakley.
Okay, now look, I will stand up and give the abortion protesters their constitutional right to lobby and protest outside of an abortion clinic. I'll even go so far as to give the Westboro Baptist Church their due and to say, yes, you can protest a veteran's funeral right in the face of the grieving family. However, I think if those protesters are hiding and camouflaging people who are doing bad things, the authorities need to step in to make sure it's a peaceful demonstration. And it's very hard. It's very hard to figure out who were the peaceful demonstrators who were exercising their free speech right and those who were trying to instigate cops so the cops would retaliate so they could then turn around and then sue them for police brutality.
Was that during the Selma to Montgomery March, or is that this weekend?
That's this past 3 weeks.
Same.
No, it's not.
Answer.
No, it's no. Well,
it's the same excuse. The out-of-town agitators. I went back and read Dr. King's letter from the Montgomery jail. I went back and read that from 1962, and it's the same argument. The out-of-town agitators, and I heard last week your guest, who's a very nice gentleman, does a wonderful job, say these backpack journalists, one of whom had his head cut off by ISIS overseas at the same week. That's not the problem. Crime is not speech. Looting and rioting and burning things down is not speech. But the vast majority of those people in Ferguson, whether they live in that community or not, they're citizens of the United States, were exercising their free speech rights. And in anticipation of potential problems, because something bad might happen, I believe those police violated the First Amendment by trying to clamp down on something they thought might happen instead of something that did. Just like Chief Justice Roberts warned us about.
What about the constitutional rights of the shop owner who was told, we're not going to protect your store because we're afraid that might incite more violence? Where's the constitutional right of that owner who is a property tax paying, sales tax paying member of the community in which when the governmental services were needed the most, they were nowhere to be found?
That's a dereliction of official duty, but it's not a violation of constitutional rights, and I'll tell you why. There's case law on hand about firefighters standing by and watching people's businesses burn to the ground, because if that business was one that they put that fire out, then they might not be able to go to another call. Some people have had their businesses burned to the ground because they didn't pay their taxes for the fire protection. There is no constitutional violation for that. The people that made that order should be fired because the police's job is to protect those businesses, but that's not a violation of constitutional rights. It's disgraceful police work, if that's in fact what the order was, but so is it disgraceful police work to shoot people with rubber bullets or pepper spray or other
first of all, the
things
police say that
didn't do
rubber
anything
bullets.
wrong.
Police say that rubber bullets were never used.
I know they say that.
Right.
There's also video showing them shooting around a neighborhood in broad daylight with rubber bullets, and maybe it was CGI'd, but it's also out there. I would like, when the facts come in, for everybody to then assess who did what. But there are people. There was one woman who was a clergy woman that was hit with a canister of mace right on her torso. That's been on Facebook and other things. I don't think that clergy woman faked her injuries. Not everything they did was a violation, but the overall tone that if you don't keep moving, or if, like the police chief said earlier, if you show up here to protest, you're going to be arrested. That stuff
but
over
you don't have a right to protest anywhere, anytime, for as long as you want.
That's true. However, the public streets are the traditional public
So
forum.
you're telling me, so I have a sidewalk outside my house in Cottleville.
That's right.
Okay. And so you're telling me that if somebody wanted to protest, they could stand on my sidewalk in front of my house and protest and blare and scream and yell and rant and rave all night long?
No. And we've talked about this before. There are time, place, and manner restrictions. However, the public streets and sidewalks are the most sacred traditional
But
public
my
forum.
sidewalk right in front of my house is public.
That's right.
That's right. So time, place, and manner. So what happens at midnight when the people protesting outside my house, when it's time for them to go home? What happens?
Well,
do the police say move along?
yeah.
And then what happens if they don't?
They can be subject to arrest, not necessarily at midnight. There's no sort of a Cinderella rule, but the restrictions on speech have to be so tight and have to be so difficult for them to have wiggle room on, and there have to be alternative options like move to a park, or if they want to protest at midnight and they can go to a place where they're not going to violate people from sleeping, they can do that. However,
so protesters have a right to stop customers from coming into my business.
people have a right to free speech, and if that means that a large group of people want to walk down the street like Dr. King did. I mean,
does a large group of people have a right to just stand in the middle of the street and block traffic?
Yes.
They do?
They do.
They do? Really?
In a traditional public forum, if there is a swell of
So you're telling me that somebody, if they want to, could shut down Highway 40 every single day in protest of whatever?
No. But if a large group of people want to go into the public street and protest, look, we applauded it when they tore down the wall in Berlin. Millions of people show up. We applauded in Lithuania or Russia. You know,
right.
We applaud it when it happens overseas.
You mean Poland? Solidarity? When Solidarity took over?
Yes, Lech Walesa and Solidaria. We applaud it when it happens in Tiananmen Square, and we outrage when they crack down on these things in other countries. But when it happens here, we're worried about the shopkeeper's right, which he doesn't have, but we're not worried about the First Amendment. I, as a small business person, and as people that were raised by entrepreneurs and small business people...
Well, wait a minute. What, hasn't shopkeepers just been approved? Businesses are now people too?
Well, you can thank the United States Supreme Court majority for that.
Well, good.
One too.
So Hobby Lobby has a right to invoke their religious freedom rights, but I, as a shop owner, don't have rights to have a safe and secure street so my customers can come visit me?
This argument can always be made that out-of-town agitators and a lot of people interrupting businesses...
Even in-town agitators.
The First Amendment's more important than the shopkeeper selling his goods.
Look, I saw 6, 7, 8 people to a car, hanging out of a car, sitting on the window of the car, sitting on the roof of the car, smoking marijuana, drinking alcohol. Nobody was arrested, all in the name of a peaceful protest. So I saw laws being broken, and the police, while trying to keep order in an impossible situation, Yes. Did they might have hit a lady preacher who was there on a peaceful mission? Absolutely. But when you're standing next to a bad guy and the cops are trying to round up the bad guys, you know what? You might get a little smoke on you.
And when you point
it's not absolute.
AR-15 at a guy and tell him you're going to blow his head off.
That's a different story.
Well,
that guy's been fired. That guy was taken off the patrol and he was fired.
This move along, keep moving business was also over the top and was, I think, a violation of the First Amendment. Why? Because our democracy is supposed to be noisy. And if they want to stand and protest, they have the right to stand and protest.
So do they have a right to shut down the Supreme Court?
Not the Supreme Court says they can't. They're the only ones where you can't protest in front of. They're hypocrites. I'm not saying Roberts isn't a hypocrite. You can thank him for Obamacare, everybody.
Can I shut down Busch Stadium during Game 7 of the World Series because I don't like something?
No, because it's not a traditional public forum. But
really, it was built by taxpayer dollars.
It's not public.
It's not public enough.
It's not a traditional public forum. A park. A college campus, a street. How is
a privately owned business on Florissant any different than Busch Stadium?
Because they're not protesting in that business.
Well, they were protesting so you couldn't get to the business.
No, they weren't. They were protesting because they were upset about.
So it's okay to set up a perimeter around Busch Stadium to protest.
I can tell you this: if it was a protest that was about a different subject matter, the response would not have been the same. They didn't. I think a lot of it was a heckler's veto. We don't like what they're saying, and I don't defend any of those crooks and criminals. In fact, not only do I not defend them, they should all be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law and admonished by every person that believes in whatever the speech was.
We got a break. That's Scott Sherman, who's clearly lost his mind this week. 9:27.